And welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. All throughout the month of November, I'm aiming to bring you a brand new review each and every day. Now, it might be a written review over at thegaminggang.com, or it could be a video review hosted by yours truly, which is obviously the case this time out. Today, I am going to share my review of the Player's Handbook for Amazing Adventures from Troll Games. This is written by Peter Vey with artwork provided by Peter Bradley, Sarah Dreamy Walker, Jason Walton, Javier Charo, and Jose Charo. And I do apologize if I've mispronounced any of those names. This 302-page hardcover is available now, carries an MSRP of $49.99. If you want to get it with the PDF, that is $59.99, or you can grab just the PDF alone over at DriveThruRPG for $19.99. All that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got the Amazing Adventures Player's Handbook. A couple of things to mention before we jump on in. First of all, my friends over at Troll Games were kind enough to provide me with this review copy. But neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's very important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page, but I do want to give you a good feel for what you're going to find inside this player's handbook. All right, let's dive on in. First thing we're going to take a peek at is the credits page. A lot of folks work very hard to bring this to life. So let's give credit where credit is due. Amazing Adventures Second Edition, which is what we're taking a look at here, is designed as a multi-genre role-playing game, or some people refer to these as generic role-playing games or genre-less role-playing games. It's my understanding the first edition of Amazing Adventures was Two-Fisted Pulp Action. I have never seen that. I've never read through that book, so I can't tell you exactly what the first edition was like. I do understand that it did utilize some elements of the Siege Engine system, which powers Castles and Crusades, the very popular fantasy role-playing game from Troll Games. But it wasn't truly Siege Engine because there were differences in the two systems. That is no longer the case. So this second edition of Amazing Adventures is a Siege Engine game. So all of these mechanics, all of the gear, all the spells, all the character classes can easily be ported over to Castles and Crusades. You can bring Castles and Crusades fantasy adventure characters over into this. So no issue whatsoever. So the vast majority of page space is going to be devoted to creating characters. And we do get a little bit of information right off the bat about the mechanics of the Siege Engine. Strangely enough, the actual game rules are the last section of this book. I thought that was kind of odd. I mean, I could see we get a little breakdown of how the Siege Engine works, start getting into the character classes. We get some advanced options, things like that. Then I would have thought we'd have gotten into the rules. No, that's not the case. So we have a variety of different classes. Some of them could easily be transferred over to Castles and Crusades. Most of them are fairly modern in style or even superhero or science fiction in style. As far as production quality, solid paper stock. We have a matte finish. I know a lot of people like a matte finish in their role-playing game books. It doesn't really matter that much to me. What's more important to me is the paper stock. This book should hold up very nicely. Artwork throughout is solid, fairly uniform. I didn't encounter anything that I was shaking my head about how did that get included. But you will see that we've got a wide variety of genres which we'll see artwork for. And even though this is kind of a multi-genre core rule book, I got to say that it focuses on certain genres far, far more than other genres. And I'm kind of surprised that that's the approach Troll Lord Games took with this, because this still kind of comes across as a two-fisted pulp action role-playing game with some other aspects. So we have got a huge section devoted to magic spells and mentalism. So right there, we've kind of got a bit of a pulpy flavor to that, especially with the mentalism. Not much as far as like science fiction, not really a whole lot as far as horror outside of some optional sanity rules and options of using, fear and terror as opposed to sanity in your games. But yeah, a lot of focus on kind of the pulp action, which is fine, but this is supposed to be essentially a multi-genre rule book. Now, if you're not familiar with Siege Engine, it powers the popular Castles and Crusades fantasy role-playing game, which I am a big fan of. You may have seen some of my coverage of Castles and Crusades releases. So it is very old school in vibe, but not necessarily old school in execution. And what I mean by that is that it really does have an old school role-playing game vibe, a feel. The overall approach to role-playing games is old school in nature, but we aren't using the same creaky old mechanics and subsystems that we've grown up with original Dungeons and Dragons, advanced Dungeons and Dragons, retro clones, OSR releases, and so forth. So it does utilize a far more modern style. In fact, in its approach, it's probably a lot more similar to third edition Dungeons and Dragons than it is, say, AD&D. Now, what we're looking at here is the Siege engine does utilize our traditional 6 attributes. We've got our strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. We've got a range of 3 to 18, and those provide us with modifiers to our 20-sided die. All that's pretty standard. What really sets the Siege engine apart, and which really allows players to customize their characters far more than just character classes and advanced character options, which are in this book, is the fact that we have primary and secondary attributes. Now, we're looking at humans in Amazing Adventures. So, humans in the Siege engine get 3 primary attributes, 3 secondary attributes. Now, depending on the class, you're going to have your class is going to recommend or demand that you have a particular attribute as primary. So that's going to leave you with 2 of your choice. So, as an example, you could have a gunslinger and have your dexterity as your primary attribute for that class. And then, let's say you're looking for more of a gunslinger who is also a private detective or more like a Sherlock Holmes type. Well, then you're going to make intelligence one of your primary attributes. It's really cool how that works. Now, as far as action resolution, when you're performing a check against an attribute, the target number for a primary attribute is 12. Secondary attribute is 18. Now, some folks might think, well, that gets kind of confusing. So there is a house rule that just about everybody I know who runs Castles and Crusades utilizes, and that is that if it's a primary, it's +6. So you're always looking at a target number of 18. Primary attributes add 6 to the roll plus whatever additional modifiers. Makes life a little bit easier. So, as I mentioned, we've got a lot of page space devoted to magic and mentalism. And these magic spells are more aimed at the kind of the occult and mesmerism as opposed to say, epic fantasy sort of role playing spells. But there is just tons and tons of these in here. And that's one of the reasons why I said, even though this is supposed to be genreless, there really is a big focus on the magic and mentalism. And keep in mind, it's not like these are superpowers, these are spells. Kind of strange, like I said. So, as you can see, we really have a lot of page space devoted to that. Then we wrap up with the rules of the game. So, this is going to be for the Chronicle Keeper, who is our game master in Amazing Adventures, and not a ton of page space because the reality is Castles and Crusades and the Siege Engine aren't real crunchy. Now, there is a Castle Keeper's Guide with all these optional rules that you can bring into play if you want more complexity. But for the most part, Castles and Crusades is theater of the mind. So you don't have a lot of tactical aspects to combat that you might see, say, in a like a Pathfinder second edition, where you've got all those various different actions you can take in your action economy. That is not the Siege Engine style. Do want to also mention this is not a game that you need to have 3 core books in order to run or to play. All your rules are located in the player's handbook. There is a Chronicle Keeper's Guide. I will have my review of that very shortly. That is, in essence, more optional content. Now, there is no bestiary in this, so you would need a bestiary. I will point out that as far as Castles and Crusades, you've got a couple of books. So you've got the Player's Handbook and the Monsters and Treasure Book. But you can easily take old school bestiaries, convert those monsters and beasts and creatures and such over to the Siege Engine. It's not difficult at all. All right, so that is a peek inside the Player's Handbook. Let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts as well as my review score. So I like the Player's Handbook for Amazing Adventures. I'm not blown away by it. And I'll explain why. And I've kind of touched on this already as we took a peek through the book. This is supposed to be a multi-genre role-playing game, or as I would put it, a genre-less role-playing game or generic role-playing game, right? It's supposed to be the Siege Engine game mechanics, and then you build whatever you want around it. You want a superhero game? Great. If you want a science fiction game, great. If you want two-fisted pulp action, you can do that. If you want modern espionage, knock yourself out. That's really not the case here. This still is far too focused on two-fisted pulp action to be a multi-genre role-playing game. We've got superhero artwork in here, but we don't really have much superheroic content. I was really surprised to see all that page space devoted to magic spells. And granted, they're not fantasy magic spells, they're more occult and mentalist spells. But still, I'm kind of surprised at the focus on that. I would have thought that maybe Troll Lord Games would have gone with a slimmer rule book, which focused on character creation, the advanced character options, because there are a lot of cool advanced character options, as well as some gear through the centuries, maybe even some futuristic gear, and then had the rules of the game, maybe even kind of expand upon the rules of the game as opposed to just the few pages that are in this player's handbook. I would have thought that would have been the direction that they go in and then release softcover genre books. You want to do science fiction? Here's 60 pages devoted to science fiction. Oh, you want to do Lovecraftian horror? Well, here's 50 pages devoted to that. I would have thought that had been the direction that Troll Lord Games would go with this new edition of Amazing Adventures. It's not. I don't know what kind of support we're going to see for Amazing Adventures either. Now, there is the Chronicle Keeper's Guide, which is available as well. As I already pointed out, I'll be reviewing that very shortly. That's all optional. That's all optional content. There's no bestiary at this point for Amazing Adventures. Now, I do believe there are 4 adventure releases that are already out for second edition Amazing Adventures. I took a peek at them quickly at Gamehole Con, and I sort of had the impression that they were adventures that had kind of been ported over, kind of converted from the first edition of Amazing Adventures. I could be absolutely wrong. That is very, very possible. But that's kind of the vibe I got. And they were kind of focused more on two-fisted pulp action, which I don't have a problem with. I like pulp games. It's just if you're trying to present something as being a variety of genres and it's not, I got a little bit of an issue with that. Once again, this isn't bad. It's not terrible. I like it. I'm going to recommend it to you. But it's important that you know what you're picking up. This is not the Troll Lord Games edition of GURPS by any stretch of the imagination. All right. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give the Amazing Adventures Player's Handbook a 6.5 out of 10. I do like it. I honestly wish I liked it a lot more. All right, that's it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell, because it'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, streams live Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central right here on YouTube. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit the newly redesigned thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to see here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. And until I see you next time, certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.